Excellent. Okay. So I'm here with Rupert Read, who's going to be joining us for the residency in Bergerac in April, setting the world to rights, starting on April 5th. And I'd like to sort of discuss. So Rupert and I have co-founded an organization called The Moderate Flank for now, which is probably going to become Climate Majority in the near future. Rupert, would you like to kind of start off by just describing what we'll call it Climate Majority for today is up to?
Yeah, well, the Climate Majority, so the name means two things. One, it means there is already a majority of people who actually get it, that climate is a really serious problem, that it's potentially going to just sweep us away unless we get onto it. And that's true since about 2019. And the second thing is that this climate majority is not yet deep enough and is not yet mobilized anything like enough. So we're aiming to deepen it and to mobilize it. We want ultimately, in your brilliant phrase, Liam, to have a new electorate, because we're never going to have a new political class until we have an electorate which has gone through a serious change of political culture and really got absolutely engaged in this project of saving the world. Not the world as it currently is right now, but the world as it could be, and not just the human world, but the more than human world. So as I see it, one of the things we'll be doing on this residency is thinking about what it means to save the world, what it really means, and thinking about that in all its complexity and getting beyond the sort of dismissive kind of sarcastic, cynical way of, oh, so you're trying to save the world, that, as you rightly say, Liam, is unfortunately far too widespread and is a way of dismissing the widely felt need for something deep and wide here.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that, right? So that's the title is "Save the World" is of course ironic. That's a very postmodern viewpoint, right? And what we're looking to do in this residency is draw this arc, go on an arc together and a journey together, and that goes for the kind of climate majority in general. It's going to be a journey together.
Yeah.
Into the unknown, right? Nobody knows. We don't know. We're not personally going to save the world. What we're working to do mainly is organize people in the UK who are part of a right now at least budding climate majority, who are in this majority of concerned people and want to become more politically mature and self-aware and organized collectively, and really build to a formidable majority rather than simply a majority of people who know that there's a problem, an active majority, right? And those people are going to be on a journey, and we're all as global citizens going to be on a journey. And we're not going to do that together in humanity without a lot of people having these really big conversations, right? This is basically knowing the world situation in a democracy. If we're actually having decentralized decision making and we have a globalized society, you can't actually avoid the big questions. You can't avoid trying to have some type of widespread effort at systemic understanding. So maybe not everybody needs to be interested in big level conversations, the 10,000 foot view, but a significant percentage of the population needs to be having on a regular basis these save the world type of conversations that we now kind of ironize, right? It's a postmodern response, right? And postmodernity is basically an age of anonymity, where we've kind of given up on the idea of progress, and we've given up on the idea that we're on an upward trajectory, and people are basically accepting what Jameson called the cultural logic of late capitalism, which means that essentially you're going to have a job that you don't believe in. You're going to live a life that isn't really something that your moral imagination would draw you towards. And that's just part of the deal. And all we're basically doing with kind of large level sense making conversations is setting up ourselves up for disappointment with the lives that we're inevitably going to lead. So we need to ironize them, right? and
Yeah,
given that we're in a time of polycrisis right now, where we have the World Economic Forum suddenly taking on this term that we at Life Itself have been mapping polycrisis response network for the last couple of years, and so we're kind of happy to see it suddenly make its way into the front pages of the World Economic Forum, right? And periodicals worldwide. Given that's where we're at, it's maybe time to have these types of conversations, and with the expectation that we're all going to need to be part of something locally, which is global,
yeah.
and understand what big forces we're dealing with in our concerted local actions.
Absolutely, and that transformation is coming. People say another world is possible, but what I say is another world is certain. The only question is, will it be a world that we want to live in or not? So when we talk about saving the world, we always need to ask what world. But what we mustn't do, as you've implied, Liam, what we mustn't do is simply dismiss the question with a sort of jaded kind of cynicism. And what we mustn't do is assume that anyone who talks about saving the world has some kind of egotistical fantasy that they alone are going to save the world. I mean, hopefully very, very few people have that kind of ridiculous fantasy. If we're going to talk about saving the world in any kind of remotely serious way, and we should, although, it brings about a kind of giggle response or whatever, we should actually have this kind of conversation about setting the world to rights. We need to do it in a way which involves principles of humility, principles of understanding how tiny we are. So saving the world is something that vast numbers of people are going to do together, if it's going to happen at all. And if it doesn't happen, what we are going to get is another world which is even worse than the world that we are currently in, because we're in a situation where we've got our democracies in a state of some decline. We've got our world's ecosystems in a state of absolutely terrifying decline, which is going to be accelerated by climate decline. And if we're not prepared to pull together and try to assemble some real collective intelligence on how a huge number of people, a climate majority, could actually create another world that is worth having, then what's our life for? Our purpose, our shared purpose at this time needs to involve being big enough to look at the really big questions. And I think one of the reasons why people don't want to is because the situation is so grim and it can feel overwhelming, and people get around that by being a bit kind of witty, or by mocking those who do want to step up to the plate and try and do something big along with huge numbers of others. That's the point. This is an absolutely thoroughly shared enterprise from start to finish. And that's one reason, I think, Liam, isn't it, why we like this term climate majority, because it says right there that what we're talking about is something absolutely huge, not the property of a very small number of people, which is sometimes the way that activists think.
Mm-mm. Yeah. So totally agreed. I think so. Maybe to go from climate majorities to a majority for political sanity in the wider sense is probably also something to discuss, right? Because what we see in the climate majority is not just the need for a majority to become aware of climate change and act to do something about it, but a majority seeing that climate change is part of a symptom of a wider state of being, a wider tendency towards poor collective decision making, economic systems which are not built for what we would call sustainability. There's an astrophysicist, Tom Murphy, talks about, like, look, the worst thing that could happen is that from the squirrel's perspective, or the perspective of the world's endangered animals, is that the humans figure out clean energy, because all that we've used energy so far for is to destroy habitats. I mean, it's just unfortunately the case, and so we're staring down the barrel of a biodiversity crisis as well, which is going to further underline that it's not about patching the political and economic system. It's about really looking into the political economic system, the culture that we have. I mean, every book that I get recommended now seems to be some version of the Enlightenment has run out of road. What do we do, including my own book? It's sort of, I'm definitely part of a very big choir in that regard, that we feel that the culture has, the rationale, dependence on rationality, sort of intellectualizing everything, individualism,
Yeah.
secular, even the idea of secularity, and even the idea of, in some ways, of equality, which is, an attachment to extreme perspectives on making everybody equal, and resisting the idea that there's differences between people, are, at the root of some of the most problematic aspects of our social conversations, right? So there's a wider cultural dysfunction, what people would call wokeism. I don't really like that term. I prefer progressive dogma, because wokeism kind of is a inherently ironic term, and I don't think that social justice deserves to be kind of referred to in a fundamentally ironic way, when other ideas which are equally problematic or more are not fundamentally referred to in an ironic way, like extreme faith in the market, for example, is every bit as ideological and every bit as nutty as the most is dogmatic progressives.
Yeah, I think that that targeting the word progressive is much more interesting, actually, because firstly, our culture's narrative, our culture's assumption of endless progress has been now drastically challenged. But secondly, many people are still inclined to think that it's obviously a good thing to be progressive. This sort of goes without saying in large sections of the center left and beyond. So when you say, well, hang on a minute, we want to call out progressive dogma, the reaction of some people at first is one of shock. Surely you don't want to interrupt the story of progress. But actually, yeah, we do. What we want to say is that if there is going to be a world that gets saved, it is going to be one in which we've been willing to let go of the many harmful aspects of that story, and where we're going to try to co-create a culture which will be in many ways a very different culture, which will not assume that things are always kind of unidirectionally moving towards largeness, impersonality, towards having more of everything and everybody having more of everything. All of these assumptions which now should be thrown out, or at least questioned. So I take it that these will be some of the issues that we'll be really digging into in Bergerac.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the discussion I think that we want to have, right, is the movement over the month, from the first steps, the kind of the basic awareness of climate crisis, to the cultural change that inevitably needs to happen. Right now there's going to be some practical fear-driven responses by untransformed people that hopefully can do something to address climate, and at the same time deeper cultural transformation. And we don't know how fast that's going to go along, but those two these two responses, sort of quite shallow or more shallow and more technical responses, more within the political system that we already have, and a deeper change in perspective and culture, will be coming along side by side. and the question is how to navigate them,
Mhm.
how to use the emerging awareness of undeniable problems as a way to change perspective, how to make the kinds of arguments that we need to make about, look, material wealth is kind of also run out of road as a strategy for welfare, and we've always been concerned about human happiness, and look, increasing incomes and increasing material wealth was really effective at that for a period of time, and we're in rich countries past that, and we really need to have a global conversation about how are we going to use material wealth and scientific advances to give as many people as possible a secure lifestyle, at the same time as not destroying the ecosystem. um, how do we get there,
Yeah,
step by step?
yeah,
What can we actually role can we play in it? And part of that comes from accepting a lot of complication. And I think this is another aspect of the residency that both you and I believe in. Like, why do we have some place like Bergerac? Well, it allows us to be together with people who have a commitment to practice, with a commitment to being centered, uh,
mm,
and who are going to give these topics the space they need and allow things to be as simple as possible and those simpler, and really accept that, yeah, this is a big question, right? If we want easy answers to
mm,
super complicated questions, we get frustrated, right? So part of it as well is to be together with a group of people who are happy to be humble in the face of big big problems, right? So
yeah,
what, and really to be humble, saying, look, there's a lot of people around the world who are coming to this same awareness. What we're doing here is just doing an experiment how to do that as quickly and deeply together with a group of people that hopefully, because the what we do at the hub is meant to be kind of experiments that get distributed, freely, uh,
mm,
throughout
mm,
the meta modern community. That what we're working on here is helpful to other people doing the same thing, and other people, of course, will learn uh, many things during the, or make use of during the residency, practices that have already been tried out in other places, and it's part of this collective kind of staring into staring at this imposing big issue. And when a lot of people do that, the predicament are
yeah,
aware of the predicament. We need millions of people doing it, or at least, probably millions of people doing it. But if we have that many, then something might just happen,
yeah,
rather than believing we need to come away with a manifesto that answers everything. What we need to do is come away with a using our best judgment to come to an awareness of where we're at. What are the big issues down the road? What type of concepts do we need to have in our back pocket to navigate this future? And basically, how are we going to go into the unknown together? Not how are we, how are we, going to play our part in saving the world,
yeah,
rather
yeah,
than
yeah.
writing
Yeah,
down.
so I think we'll be, as you say, we'll be basing some of this out of mindful practice, spiritual practice. We'll be doing a lot of talking. We'll be doing a lot of deep listening. We'll be sharing some bottles of wine. We'll be going for walks. We'll be canoeing together, stuff like that. We'll be connecting with people elsewhere in the world. And it's an opportunity to really dive quite deep into that, and to have a chance to actually come to grips with these really huge questions that we've been mooting here in this last 20 minutes or so, that too often people think are just too huge to even engage with. But yeah, we think they have to be engaged with.
Yeah, and I think the invitation for people who would like to apply is that your questions are welcome. We haven't laid out a totally precise program
No, not at all.
Yeah,
In fact, the program is going to be more than usually open, right? It's going to be very emergent.
Yeah, and people can read some of the blog posts that are on Life Itself about some of the questions for more information. But the invitation is come with your own question, to this gathering as well, and your own practices, particularly. I mean, the practices of being, we can even say, would you like to say spiritually or psychologically, pick your term, ready for the gravity of what we're facing, what we're discussing, and really changing your attitude, getting away from that irony that we were talking about before, and into a kind of humility and agency, about it. Is
yeah.
It's not done by conversation alone. So we're going to take that emotional aspect very seriously.
Yeah.
People are ready to contribute to that.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to it hugely.
Yeah. Are you any question you'd like to put forward as one in particular that you'd like to be asking beyond what we've discussed?
Well, I think I'll just come back to where I started, really, which is I'd love people to be thinking about how another world is certain, and what does their heart yearn for in that world? What world are we going to make in this situation where we're certain that there's going to be transformation? We're certain that the status quo, that we cannot go on like this. So how are we going to lean into what that makes possible?
And maybe even how are we going to convince people as well?
Yeah,
we're going to broadcast a message that another world is certain.
Yeah. And I think that part of the answer to that question is by making it interesting, by making it fun, by making it something that can be talked about, by making it start to happen together. And that's again how this residency could be enlivening and agential, because it'll give people a little taste of that.
Great. Okay. Yeah. Absolutely.
So see you there.
Yeah, see you there.